All right, welcome everyone to learn how to play Resurgence, a new Euro game. It's a Kickstarter. I got it about, I don't know, a month ago, and I've played it a few times and enjoy it. So I thought I would record a playthrough video and how to play video. So it's a game where it's a post-apocalyptic game where you play a band of survivors. I guess you play the hero of a band of survivors, and this represents your compound, your base of operations, and your goal is to kind of rebuild society, or a resurgence of society. And the map here represents a city where you'll take actions and gain resources and rescue survivors, take missions, and over the course of 6 rounds you will gain victory points, here's the track, and hopefully win. As a solo playthrough channel, I'm really going to focus mostly on the solo rules, so some things I may say may be different than the multiplayer rules. I also may omit multiplayer rules, so I'm not trying to be comprehensive for multiplayer and solo. So you should definitely read the rules if you're going to be playing multiplayer, and I do recommend looking over the rules if you're playing solo too. But it's helpful to see it, and so that's what I'm here for. So let me just kind of orient you to the board and what you see here. So on the main board we have the leadership track, and you can move up along this track based on your assignments. So this is the assignment board, and you'll draw workers out of a bag of your color and then place them here, and then based on the strength of that worker you'll gain leadership points, and then once you compare that against the mutant, the solo opponent, they'll move up, you'll move up, or both, or neither. Along the way of the leadership track there are different resources you might gain or actions you can take, and when you cross over that, as soon as you land on it, you take that immediately, and then at the end of the game you score based on your position on the track. Here we have spaces for missions. This left column is advanced missions, which you can only take if your compound is level 3, and here you have basic missions. There is also a deck of starter missions, and in the solo game you draw 2 of them, and you can choose 1 to start with. Up along the top here we have a row for survivors, and so we'll turn up, and these each represent an advanced worker. So this icon up here in the upper right is the worker that the advanced worker that you'll be able to add to your draw bag if you rescue this survivor. Then here at the bottom you have what they allow you to do. So the chef, every time you rescue a worker, or I should say, when you rescue a worker, you can turn this face down to gain a food. So you can only do it once per turn, so not every time you rescue a survivor. And they do all sorts of different things. So the iconography, once you understand it, is pretty self-explanatory. There isn't a ton of referencing rules in this game. I feel like after a play or two you can kind of be off and running. Then on the main board here on the map we have 6 different districts: the Arbat, Museum Row, Hope Island, Kremlin, Revolution Square, Barbarian Gate districts, and then within each district there are 2 zones, and these are where you'll place your workers. You can only place 1 worker in a zone per turn. You can't put 2 in the same zone. If there's a different, so if the mutants have placed one of their people, and I'll show you how that happens in a second. One of their mutant people in a zone, you can place there. You just have to pay an additional resource of any type. So the 3 resources, there's, show you that now, there's food, parts, and fuel. And these are tracked on your player board here. And here on the main board you can you get different kinds of resources. So you've got, just to walk through, you have the parts, food, and fuel, ways to gain them. And you have your basic worker, which is a laborer. So the laborer would get you 1 part, 2 food, or 1 fuel. And then there's the respective advanced workers. So a builder would get you 2 parts. So builder, scout, and maybe they call them rangers. I'm blanking off the top of my head. And scientists. So builder's 2 parts, scout is 3 food, and a scientist is 2 fuel. So you have those kinds of places, so gaining resources. You also have down here in the harbor, you have the capacity to build. So the builder, you would pay 1 part, and a laborer, you'd pay 2 parts to come over here in your compound, and building allows you to remove the rubble, which are these tokens, from one of these rooms, and then you can use that. And you can use that the same turn if you have a worker assigned in order to do that. On the back side of these rubble are random rewards, and so as soon as you build a room, you get those rewards. And a note about building is you can only build rooms that are on the level of your base. So right now I'm level 1, I can only build these rooms. Oops. Level 2 allows me to build those, and so on. And then back on the board, so we have these 2 spots. So a scientist allows you to gain a mission and get a med. Scout allows you to gain a mission and get a ammo. And those are, I'll show you those in a second. Those ammo and meds are tracked on your player board. At the start of the game, these are the only 2 ways you have to gain missions, which are an important part of your economy, which I'll show you in a moment. Completing missions is an important way to continue to get resources throughout the game. And lastly, you have these 2 spots, which are ways to upgrade your draw bag, essentially. So this is the weaker version. You place a laborer, and you can take any one of the advanced workers and place survivors and place it in your draw bag. You're not replacing the laborer, you're just gaining the advanced survivor. And then here, this is rescuing. So you use a laborer and you pay the food cost associated with the slot here in order to rescue that survivor. And so the survivors, like I said, you would add this token to your draw bag. So you are improving your draw bag in the same way you are placing here, but this is a superior way because you're also gaining the skill of the survivor. And you can kind of chain these together, so you're building synergies and, again, important part of your economy. And Euro games are all about building your engine. These spots here are for events, and they aren't used in the solo game. Although maybe there's a way to kind of adjust the solo rules and use them, but I haven't explored that yet. So not used in the out-of-the-box solo game. Okay, moving over here to your compound. So you have your trackers here on the left. You have 1 through 9. You have your trackers for your different resources. Here at the top, you have your dual tracker for your ammo and meds. And you score points at the end of the game for these. So you add up all of your different kinds of parts, divide by 3, round down. Every 3 gives you 1 victory point. And then for your ammo and meds, you're getting, over here, you got 2, 4, 6. So if my meds are on anywhere on this row, I get 2, 4, and 6 respectively, and the same for the ammo. And you use these ammo and meds, you need to have a certain amount in order to upgrade your base, and then the main way you use these is in satisfying missions. And then here in your compound, you start with only a couple options. You can place a laborer to get a food, or a laborer to get an ammo or med. And then using the build actions over here, you can uncover these other rooms. And I'm not going to go through them all. You can read about them and sort of study them on your own. But it's an important way to get access to more powerful missions and work your way up to winning the game. Along the top here you have spots for active missions, and then here at the bottom you have slots for completed missions. So I'll go ahead and show you kind of an example mission now. So here we've got clear a minefield. So on the left are the requirements. The middle is where you need to place a worker in order to complete this mission. So if I were to place, and this is Revolutionary Square, so if I were to place a survivor here in either of those zones, I would then be able to complete this mission if I can pay those resources, and then I gain these rewards. So there's 3 victory points, and that symbol is retire a worker. So I can, from my draw bag or from the rest area, which I'll show you why workers would end up there in a second, I can remove one of those lowly laborers from my draw bag. So you're making your draw bag more efficient. So that's the anatomy of a card. Oh, I shouldn't have shuffled it back in because I need to show you. So pretending, sorry, it's a different one, but if I were to complete this, then this symbol also dictates where it goes on the bottom. So this is Museum Row. So that comes down here. And that's important because during the upkeep phase of your turn, you gain resources for this. So at the end of every turn for the rest of the game, I'm gaining an ammunition for completing that mission. And the rewards are ammo, ammunition, and either fuel or food. So the first time you complete a row, one of each type, you can rescue a survivor for free. So you don't pay the food cost, instantly rescue a survivor from up here, the top of the board. And so over here on the right, you have your compound level, you have the victory points if you're at that level at the end of the game, and you also have the requirements to upgrade from level 1 to 2, from 2 to 3. So the requirements to upgrade from the level is listed in there. So I'm referencing here if I want to go to level 2. And what this says is that you don't pay, so you have to have at least 3 ammo and meds, but you don't pay those, you don't lose them in order to upgrade. You just have to meet that requirement. But here's what you pay. So to go from 1 to 2, I would pay 1 fuel and 1 food. And the rules say you can upgrade twice in a turn if you meet those requirements. All right, and carrying on, we have the assignment board. During the first phase of the turn, you're going to place your survivors here, and it serves a couple purposes. First, it determines which zone type you can place into, and secondly, and that's metro, harbor, or compound here, and secondly, it determines whether and how far you advance up the leadership track. And in the solo game, that's determined by these decks here, this mutant deck, and I'll show you that in a little bit. I think that's good for now. So I'm going to move on and kind of walk through a turn, and yeah, just talk through the phases of a turn. So The first part of the turn is to draw and assign. So you draw a number of survivors from your bag. You draw at compound level 1, you draw 4. At levels 2 and 3, you draw 5. And level 4, you draw 6. And then you place them. And in the solo game, the solo rules tell you to turn over a card from the mutant deck, which you build out of these two types of cards. You turn that over before you make your assignments, which seems odd to me, and I've changed that because in the multiplayer, you don't know what other people are doing. This is hidden. And it doesn't make sense to me why that wouldn't also be a component of the solo game. So I just play now that I make my assignments and then turn over the card. Yeah, so that's phase 1. You draw and make your assignments. Then you determine how far you move on the leadership track. So as I play it, I then turn over the card, and then this will tell you what happens. So you can see if this card had come up and I'd placed 0 to 1 points, the mutants would move up. If I did 2 points, we would both move up. 3 to 4, I'd move 1. 5 plus, I'd move 2. And how you determine your points is based on the type of and number of worker you place into the zone. So laborers are worth 1 point. Any of the advanced workers, scientists, builders, or rangers are worth 2. And then your hero is worth 3. And that's just, it's not worth 3 that number of movements. It's just worth that many points, which you then determine your movements. That's not the only way to move up these leadership tracks. Some of the missions will allow you to do that as well. And there's one spot on your compound board that, if you uncover it and use it, will let you do that as well. So the next phase is worker actions. So then you, first off, in the solo game, the mutants will go first. So from this deck, which is 6 cards, you'll always use the same 6 cards. They represent the 6 districts. You'll turn up 1. This is the Barbarian Gate, and so then you come to this district and you place a mutant token in each of the zones. And this just makes it more expensive for you to place a worker there. You have to pay an additional resource of any kind to place into that. And then after placing, the mutant refers to its card and takes an action. So in the Barbarian Gate, you would exhaust one of your survivors, and the mutants would get 1 victory point. Some of it's an option, so you can avoid giving the mutants victory points if you can pay the cost. And this is double-sided, so on the Revolution Square place, on both sides you would complete a mission, and then they would flip the board. So a little variety there. So the mutants would go first like that, and then you would take 1 worker from any of these spots and you'd place it out on the board. And you would pay the cost if there is, take the effect. You could also complete a mission, as I described, if you have a mission. You can't gain a mission and complete it in the same turn. And you can also use a survivor. So if the survivor here requires you, let's find one, here's the surgeon. So by placing in the harbor, I could get a fuel or a food. So I'd place in the harbor, I could turn that over and gain that resource. Just like missions, you cannot use a survivor, if you've rescued them, you cannot use them in the same turn that you gain them. All right, so the mutants would go, I would go, mutants would go again, cover up 2 more spots in another district, I would go, the mutants do that a 3rd time, and then after that point, I just play out, because you're always going to be drawing more than 3 survivors. So moving on, in the final phase of the turn, you're doing upkeep, so you're replenishing. You would discard any survivors still in these slots and then replenish the row. You would refill any missions that have been taken. You would turn up, refresh any survivors you have in your next to your board. Then you would collect all your workers, all your survivors from wherever you've placed them, and they would go into the rest area on your compound. So you don't get the benefit of the spot, but they just stay here until you need to draw more from your draw bag, and then you take all from your rest area and put them back in your draw bag, and then continue drawing. And it's a nice mechanic because it means, if you've drawn all your laborers, they don't immediately go back into your draw bag and then dilute your draw to get your more advanced specialists. So it just kind of evens out the flow of survivors in and out of your draw bag. And it's also, kind of thematic, right? Like after doing stuff out in the city, everybody has to come and rest for a bit. And then you do a very important part of the game, which is, like I said, when you complete missions, they come down here and you gain those resources. So you gain any ammo, meds, ammo, or fuel, or food, based on the number. So if you have 2 cards here, you're going to get 2 ammo, and likewise across the row here. After you do that, then you have the choice to upgrade your compound. So, when you're factoring in if you want to upgrade your compound, be sure to factor in what you may do in terms of completed missions into that. So then you would pay the cost if you meet the thresholds for ammo and meds, and upgrade your compound. So that's the overview. One little thing I forgot to mention, in terms of worker placements, the laborers can only go into laborer spots. The builder, scientist, or rangers can go into either their specific slot or a laborer slot. And a hero token can go into any spot on the board. So that's a turn overview. You would go through that 6 times, and at the end of the 6th round, you're going to move on to scoring. And the mutants will score. They're going to be getting points for the missions they complete. They'll also score for their position on the leadership track. And they'll score, you also turn up directives, which are these cards, which is a couple kind of guiding missions, I suppose you could say, for the game. And you score a number of victory points based on how you do. So, and the mutants will score the highest level for both directives. So the VP they've gained from completing missions and any actions they take, leadership track, and directives. And you as the player, you score for your position on the leadership track. And so what that means is the person in the lead scores 7, the next highest scores 4. You can't score at all if you're on 0, but that I don't think that could ever happen to you. So you're scoring 7 or 4. If you tie, you would score the lower side. So if you're at the same spot, you're both scoring 4 points. As a player, you score for your compound level here. You score for your leftover resources. You just total up of all the different kinds and you divide by 3, rounding down. You score 1 point for every 3 remaining resources. You score for your ammo and meds, and each of these rows is basically a tier. So if you end the game anywhere on this level, you're scoring 2 points, 4 points, or 6 points. And you do that separately for each ammo and meds. So you score different tiers for each. And along the way, you're going to be scoring points The main way you would score is for any missions you complete. Also these rubble tokens, some of them will have victory points on them. Some cards, some survivor cards will allow you to score victory point based on some kind of action you took. So that's a general overview, and let me end just by kind of recapping changes I've been playing with to the solo mode. So as I mentioned, I don't turn up the mutant card before I make my assignments. I do that afterwards so that my assignments are still secret. And I kind of compensate, so instead of, as the rules say, starting at 5, I move it down to 4 because I just have a little bit less of an advantage than I would if I was seeing what the mutants were going to do before my placement. And another thing I've been experimenting with is on the last 3 turns of the game, where I'm dealing with these more advanced leadership track cards, I'm also turning up more of these. So I still turn up 3, 1 per, alternating with my own worker placements and placing mutant tokens to block the spaces. But then on the last 3 turns, I'm turning up 1 more. And I'm not blocking those spaces, but I'm just taking that action. And I really actually like how that kind of shakes things up. I mean, first of all, the mutants are getting that extra action, but it also makes it a little more unpredictable what they're going to do. So because there's 6 cards and they're doing 3 per turn, if you turn up 3 and you have those 3 sitting in the discard, on the next turn you don't know what order they're going to come out, but you know exactly where the mutants are going to be placing. And now if you're changing that in the last 3 rounds and you're turning up an additional card, then the next turn you know these 2, but then you're going to have to reshuffle and redraw. So there's this element of unpredictability there. The mutants in a couple of those games have drawn us after a reshuffle like that, have drawn again a district where they already have a mutants placed when it's placement, and I've just decided that's kind of luck of the draw for them. They are still getting the additional action from the 4th card, so maybe I get lucky and they only block 2 zones as opposed to 3. But yeah, so I like that. I like it because it scores them a little higher potentially. It also puts a little more pressure on me to prevent what they're doing. So I'm having to switch to my backup mic here for the final bit. And so I actually haven't won at that level with the mutants. So I feel like it's a good difficulty level. And I could see a couple ways of increasing the difficulty even further from there if I can actually beat it. So you could, use all 4 of these advanced cards and only 2 of that. That's one. You could, move these back up or down the leadership track. If you wanted it a little bit easier, maybe you don't draw a 4th card during the final 3. So there's ways to tweak it. I haven't kind of written that out, or I don't expect that I will. I don't know. Who knows? But maybe someone will come up with the kind of different difficulty levels. But the out-of-the-box solo rules they're not great. I feel like they kind of do the game a little bit of a disservice, particularly with the being able to see this before you place. And then I don't really like what they have you do to increase the difficulty of the game. You start the mutants at 10 or 20 points, so you just give them a head start, but mechanically they don't do anything different. So it doesn't really feel like, I don't know, it doesn't feel like a challenge. I played the solo rules out of the box, and I started it in my first game, and I started at 10 points, and I beat the bot by like almost 20 points. And I feel like if you're able to do that on your first game, and I didn't make any mistakes, surprisingly. The very first playthroughs, usually I make a ton of mistakes, but this one I didn't. If I'm able to do that on my first game when I don't really know what's going on, something's wrong. So anyway, I made some decisions there to increase the solo difficulty. So yeah, I think that covers it. You can look elsewhere. I'm going to make some playthrough videos, and you can look there to kind of see the game in action and kind of see decisions I'm making in real time. I'll also go over the actual setup. You'll see me complete the setup, put out the cards, make my initial choices of starter mission. I didn't even mention the salvage deck. At the beginning of the game, you turn over some cards here, and you get some starting resources. So I'll cover all that in the first playthrough. So, but I think this video is more just about getting the higher level. What's the flow of the game? What are your goals? How do you score? How does your opponent work? But you can see the game in action if you look for those other videos. So thanks so much for watching, and hope you join me again. And until then, happy gaming.